Elvis Santiago was only 17, but the dream he carried felt big enough to fill the entire AGT auditorium. Growing up in a small barangay outside Cebu City, he spent nights listening to old Elvis Presley songs on a cracked Bluetooth speaker, imagining himself on a stage where millions watched. When he finally stepped onto the AGT stage, the lights felt hotter than he expected, the room larger than anything he had ever stood inside. His hands were shaking, but he tried to hide it by gripping the microphone a little too tightly. When the judges asked his name, his voice wavered, but he forced a smile, hoping no one could see how terrified he truly was. He announced he would be performing an Elvis Presley classic, and the crowd cheered at the coincidence of his name. But as soon as the music began, everything changed. The first line slipped out shaky, fragile, uncertain. He tried to recover, but each second felt heavier than the last. His timing fell behind. His breath control collapsed. He could hear his own heartbeat louder than the backing track. Seconds later, Simon Cowell lifted a hand, signaling for the music to stop. Elvis froze mid-note, feeling his soul drop to the floor. The judges exchanged looks, polite but disappointed, while the audience stayed painfully quiet. It was the kind of silence that crushes dreams. Elvis stood still, embarrassed, unable to breathe. Simon told him the performance wasn't ready, that he needed more experience, and that AGT wasn't the right stage, yet. Elvis nodded, pretending to understand, but inside he felt a storm ripping through him. He walked off the stage with his vision blurred by tears, feeling like he had just lost the one chance he had to lift his family out of struggle. Backstage, a producer offered him a tissue, but he could barely speak. He kept replaying the 4-minute disaster in his head, how he cracked, how Simon stopped him, how the camera probably caught every tear. He felt small, defeated, certain this moment would haunt him forever. What he didn't know was that outside the studio, the world was about to see things differently. That night, AGT posted a short clip of the audition, just 40 seconds of the shaky performance and the emotional exit. Within hours, the video exploded online. People weren't mocking him, they were rooting for him. Comments flooded in from the Philippines, the United States, and everywhere in between. Strangers wrote that the boy had a softness in his voice worth saving. Some fans claimed the judges were too harsh. Others shared their own stories of failing before succeeding. The clip reached millions overnight. By the next morning, celebrities reposted it, saying he deserved a second chance. Hashtags with his name trended worldwide. People were touched not by his mistakes, but by the vulnerability in his eyes. Elvis woke up to hundreds of notifications on his phone, thinking it must be a glitch. When he opened the messages, he almost dropped the device. Friends from Cebu, classmates, neighbors, and even people he had never met were telling him he inspired them. His mother cried when she saw the support, telling him, maybe this is not a failure. Maybe this is the beginning. Elvis didn't fully believe it yet, but he felt a tiny spark in his chest, something warm, something he thought he had lost when he walked off that stage. Little did he know that his rejection had reached someone else too, someone whose opinion mattered most. Simon Cowell had seen the online reaction, and for the first time in years, the judge wondered if he might have judged too quickly. Elvis had no idea that his journey wasn't over, it was just being rewritten. A week after Elvis Santiago's failed audition went viral, his life felt like it was spinning in two directions at once. On one side, he still carried the sting of that 4-minute rejection, a memory that replayed every time he closed his eyes. On the other side, the messages, comments, and encouragement flooding his phone made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't given up on him the way he feared. While Elvis stayed quiet, trying to make sense of all the attention, Simon Cowell sat in his office reviewing clips from the show. When he reached Elvis's audition again, he didn't focus on the mistakes this time. He focused on the tremble in the boy's voice, the pain in his eyes, the warmth beneath the fear. There was something raw there, something untrained but undeniably real. For the first time, Simon wondered if he had shut the door too quickly. He called the AGT producers and asked for Elvis's number. The staff exchanged surprised looks. Simon rarely reconsidered a decision once he made it. But this case felt different. When Elvis received the call, he almost didn't answer, thinking it was another reporter trying to get a comment. But when the voice on the other end introduced himself as Simon Cowell, Elvis's heart nearly stopped. Simon explained that the world had seen potential in him, and that he himself now believed the young Filipino singer deserved a second chance. He offered Elvis an opportunity to return to AGT for a private, second-chance session, where he could perform again without the pressure of a full audience. Elvis felt speechless. He wanted to say yes instantly, but nerves held him back. He wondered if he could survive failing twice. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder and told him, "Opportunities like this don't come twice. God is giving you back what you thought you lost." With that, Elvis gathered his courage and agreed. Over the next several days, he practiced relentlessly. He studied breath control, pitch, timing, everything that had gone wrong in the first audition. He stood in front of a mirror for hours, singing until his voice cracked from exhaustion. He recorded himself on his phone, played it back, and corrected himself again and again. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just dreaming of being a singer. He was working like one. When the day of the second chance session arrived, Elvis walked onto a smaller stage set up inside the AGT studio. There were no thousands of people watching, no thunderous crowd, but the moment still felt heavy. Simon sat in the center, leaning forward, studying him with a seriousness that made Elvis's chest tighten. He breathed slowly, remembered the advice he had been practicing, and began to sing, "Can't Help Falling in Love." This time, his voice didn't shake. His tone carried emotion instead of fear. He closed his eyes and let the lyrics flow through him, thinking of his family, his struggles, and the heartbreak of that first audition. When he finished, the room was silent for a long, tense second. Then Simon stood up and clapped softly, telling Elvis he had just witnessed one of the most powerful comebacks he'd ever seen. After the session, Simon didn't just give Elvis a yes, he gave him guidance. He told him to stay true to the softness in his voice, to trust emotion over perfection, and to use the pain from his first rejection as fuel rather than shame. Elvis left the room feeling lighter, stronger, and ready for the real stage again. Days later, he returned to the AGT stage for his official redemption performance. This time, when he walked under the bright lights, the audience recognized him instantly and erupted in cheers. Elvis looked over at Simon, who gave him a small nod as if saying, "Show them who you really are." And for the first time, Elvis believed he could. When Elvis Santiago advanced to Hollywood Week, he imagined it would feel like victory, but the moment he arrived, the pressure hit him harder than any rejection he had ever faced. The theater buzzed with extraordinary singers, dancers, and performers from every corner of America. Some were trained since childhood, some were viral sensations, and some had resumes full of music school achievements. Elvis, on the other hand, felt like a boy who had stumbled into a world built for giants. He carried a small backpack, a heart full of hope, and a fragile confidence that could crack at any second. During rehearsals, he watched contestant after contestant hit powerful notes with flawless precision. Their confidence made him shrink a little more each time. When his turn came to run through his piece, he struggled. His voice wavered, his breathing got uneven, and he fumbled on a note that should have been easy. The vocal coach paused, giving him a sympathetic look that felt like a quiet warning. Elvis felt the same burn in his chest he had felt the day he was rejected in his first audition. Doubt crept in fast. By lunchtime, he was sitting alone at a corner table, wondering if he belonged there at all. He considered calling his mom to say he wanted to go home. But fate stepped in again when Simon Cowell happened to walk through the rehearsal hallway and noticed Elvis sitting with his head down. Simon approached him and simply asked, "What's going on?" Elvis hesitated, but the truth spilled out: his fear, his insecurity, his belief that everyone else was better. Simon listened carefully and then said something that broke through every wall Elvis had built around his confidence. "They may be louder, but that doesn't mean they're better. You have something they don't have: soul. You feel what you sing. That can't be taught." Those words didn't erase the pressure completely, but they planted courage back into Elvis's chest. He returned to practice with renewed focus, choosing a mix of old Elvis Presley style and his own modern tone. When the day of the Hollywood performance arrived, he stepped onto the stage determined not to let fear win again. As he sang, something magical happened. His voice flowed naturally, warm and controlled. The audience sensed his authenticity immediately and responded with encouraging cheers. By the final note, the judges were smiling, and Sophia nodded in approval as Howie praised his emotional delivery. When Simon told him he had earned a spot in the semifinals, Elvis nearly broke down in relief. For the first time, he felt like he belonged on that stage, not just as a comeback story, but as a true contender. Semifinals week brought a new mix of excitement and fear. Elvis wanted to create a moment that audiences would never forget. He chose a stripped-down acoustic version of Suspicious Minds, wanting to show vulnerability instead of theatrics. When he walked onto the massive stage, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell across the room. He closed his eyes and let the first words pour out, his voice steady and heartbreakingly sincere. As the song built, the audience became more connected to him, and you could feel the room shift. Halfway through, something extraordinary happened. The cheers grew louder, waves of emotion filled the theater, and Simon Cowell suddenly hit the golden buzzer. The stage exploded with gold confetti as Elvis froze in disbelief, his hands shaking as he covered his face. The audience roared while Elvis struggled to breathe through the shock. Simon walked onto the stage, placed a hand on his shoulder, and told him, "Your rejection didn't define you. Your courage did. You just proved what I always hoped you were capable of." Elvis cried openly, overwhelmed by the moment. This time, he wasn't the boy who failed on stage. He was the boy who fought his way back and turned heartbreak into triumph. And as the confetti fell around him, he realized his life had officially changed forever.